Kaelene Curry has helped athletes and high performers develop the mental skills needed to compete with confidence, resilience, and purpose. She's seen firsthand what separates good performers from great ones, and today we'll explore what she's learned along the way. Kaelene is a certified mental performance consultant, a licensed professional counselor, and the founder of Mile High Performance Consulting, LLC, where she works with athletes, coaches, executives, and other performers to help them strengthen their mental game and perform consistently under pressure. Before launching her private practice, Kaelene served as the director of mental performance for Vanderbilt University football. She was embedded within the team to support athletes and coaches throughout the season. And her experience working inside one of the nation's premier collegiate athletic programs gives her a unique perspective on the challenges of elite performance, leadership, and team culture.
All right. Welcome and thanks so much for joining us, Kaelene. It's great to have you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to chatting again, talking shop with you all for the next hour.
Wonderful. Well, let's start with Vanderbilt. When people hear the title Director of Mental Performance, what did that role actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that was a really exciting chapter. It really resembled the title quite well, which was very exciting. So I was hired by the head coach. And so through that, there was a lot of energy, interest, buy-in, whatever you want to call it, for my role and my ability to come in and help influence and train athletes from the psychological mental side of the game. And so for 3 years there, I was fortunate to really be another coach, just of a different body part. And so I was very much embedded into the system and into the program. My office was in the same hallway as the offensive side of the ball. So I was right next to, I was neighbors with the wide receiver coach, right across from the specialist coaches. And so it was really exciting to be very much a part of that group, a part of that system, a part of the team, and to be looked at that way. I know sometimes in our profession, we can feel like we're on the outskirts or the outside. And so that was just very exciting, very fortunate to have that experience and have the head coach very thoughtful and intentional around how I was being integrated, how my position was communicated in the messaging and the way that we framed things to the athletes so that there was more engagement, again, in buy-in and utilization of the services. So very much got to be fairly integrated into that program, which too, we can probably think about the pros and cons that could come with that as well. Definitely challenges as a practitioner being embedded and integrated in such a way, really having to be conscious and mindful of dual roles and boundaries and things of that nature, but also having the privilege of being seen as part of the system. And then, therefore often around the team, just like any other staff member or coaching member, which then creates this comfortability or familiarity with the role, as opposed to, sometimes feeling like you're a little bit removed from that system. So I'm sure we could go down a rabbit hole within that, but worked at multiple levels within the program, athletes, coaches, support staff, so on and so forth. So very systemic in nature and still very much prioritized towards the athletes and providing them with some mental skills and tools for them to be able to utilize to influence their performance and mental performance and holistic performance as well. So I could talk probably the whole time about that role. It was really exciting and fun. Very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Incredible.
And in terms of what that role looked like on game day, you mentioned previously that during games you would take notes on different mental performance observations and then discuss them with your weekly meetings with Coach Clark Lee during the season. So I'm curious, what types of things were you watching for?
Yeah. It depended on the year, depended on the time of season, or things that we were working on, things that we were highlighting or prioritizing, emphasizing as a staff, or, listening to Coach Lee's messaging or things that he was emphasizing that he was finding important. And sometimes that was informing my observation. In general, I would say observations were very much around behavioral psychology types of concepts. So how are we looking in terms of body language and communication and team dynamics and chemistry and how people are communicating to each other. Is it effective in the midst of chaos and competition? So things like that would certainly stand out as you get to know each individual too, or each position group. You might also start to learn what is kind of like standard baseline and then what's deviating from that. So being able to pick up on when they feel like they're kind of outside of their optimal zones or things of that nature. Certainly things that are outliers stand out a lot. Might take a note on that and see if there's an opportunity then the next day to approach if it feels appropriate, whether it's a coach or an athlete. And then, yeah, we would always have goals, process goals, things like that we were working towards within that week for game day. And so oftentimes I was also writing down, hey, these are our process goals. These are the things that we're emphasizing, or this is team identity that we're wanting to show up on game day. And I'm looking for those things. Where are they being actualized? And to be able to share back with Coach Lee during our one-on-one meetings and kind of debriefs of the game from a psychological standpoint, like how are these things coming to life or not, and what can we then tweak and make adjustments to in the next week, or what type of message do we feel like the team might be needing based on the performance of the previous week and the build up to. Yeah, it was very fun to be able to connect with him after games. We would do essentially like a reflective framework together where we'd just go through, various components of the game. What are things that went well? What are things that we want to improve upon? What did we learn about ourselves or the team or himself, whatever that is, and utilize a framework that helped us to process and reflect after games. We would just kind of both share some of the observations from our different perspectives and different seats.
That makes sense. And did you communicate any of these observations during the game with the coach or players?
Very rarely. I would say if it was really clear that a brief intervention could be helpful and supportive, there were times where maybe I would make myself available or see if I could talk to an athlete. However, I feel like I learned, certainly through my first year and beyond, they already have a lot of inputs in a game. And so I really wanted to make sure, is my input going to help influence at this time in this moment in a positive way? Or am I going to be another piece of noise that then they're having to filter out? So was very conscious and intentional around, noticing how much stimulation they have across the course of a 3.5 4 hour game, and multiple coaches, multiple teammates, multiple support staff, everybody kind of trying to get their 2 cents in. So very much wanted to make sure if I was going to be one of those inputs, it was going to be like, again, a brief intervention here and now, really going to help them in that moment. And if not, would see if there's an opportunity to connect throughout the next week about whatever an observation might be, and being able to have an opportunity to help support, whether it's during practice on the sidelines or having them come into the office or catching them in the hallway, something like that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense what you're saying about the various inputs and being strategic with your influence there. And I'm wondering, after being around elite athletes every day, what patterns did you notice that separated the athletes that continued to grow versus those who plateaued?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, one of the things that comes to mind right off the top of my head that probably most of us in the field would lean towards an answer like this is the ability to respond and get back to the present from whatever the previous play was, previous rep, previous instance. Really being able to have routines that can help support getting back to present moment focus and focusing on the right things at the right time. Being able to release whatever mistake or something that didn't go their way, to be able to stay present and get back to highest performance in that moment. So I would certainly say that is a huge skill of training our attention and having that mindfulness, notice ourselves wandering or distracted or impulsive or whatever that may be, reacting to the moment and getting right back into, our best focus to help us perform at the highest level. And being able to train that, right? Not that only showing up in games, but also showing up in training sessions and being able to get reps when we're in training, whatever type of training session it may be. So I definitely think of that one right off the top of my head. And then I would say too, your elite athletes are really paying attention to and focused on like the holistic part of performance, not just, am I doing my best between the 2 hour training block or the 4 hour game time? Am I also paying attention to the foundations of wellness that are supporting highest performance when I need it? So how am I, making sure that I'm fueling and I'm getting the sleep I need and I'm getting recovery modalities and I'm being intentional and I'm reflecting so that I can learn and grow forward, all of those pieces that are just kind of holistic. And again, more lifestyle or life skill tools, excuse me, as opposed to just being like between the whistles, am I, where I need to be? Because everything influences performance.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without naming any names, have you ever seen an athlete with incredible physical ability whose mindset really limited their potential?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure we all have too. We could probably think of some athletes we've worked with, and hopefully that's where we come in and we can help to support and help say like, hey, how did you gain all these physical skills? Well, you probably trained them. You got the reps. You were in the gym. So let's get in the mind gym. What are we doing for our mental training to help support the skill that you need again from the psychological or maybe nervous system side of things, as opposed to really only focusing on technical, tactical, or physical skills, right? You've been able to train those to get where you are. Now let's look at this other side of the coin so that you can bolster those skills just like you've built the others.
What about on the flip side, athletes where maybe they don't have as much natural talent, but they really outperform the more gifted teammates because of their mental approach? What kind of made the difference? What gave them that leg up, and what did it really teach you?
Yeah. I would say on that side of the coin, I mean, you've got the athletes, the people who are maximizing, right, the most of what they have. And I think you do that again through starting with those foundational levels. Like, are you taking care of yourself and your needs? And then that allows you to be resilient and be persistent and handle adversity, and put forth the effort that's needed for you to be able to continually see these like incremental growths over time. I think those athletes are just really persistent and driven and really focused on learning and getting better at a potentially slow process, but knowing that their efforts will pay off. And maybe having that connection to why, I think that could potentially be a big piece of that, is like knowing their values, knowing who they are, knowing what their why is, and what's motivating them, staying connected to those things to help then get through moments when they feel like they're in a plateau, or maybe that they're in a valley, or like that they're not as gifted or talented or whatever those comparison types of thoughts might be, to whoever is also on the field with them, and staying connected to why they're there and why they're motivated, what's motivating them to keep going. That can certainly be helpful too for the long game.
You
Mhm.
see this a lot in the difference between practice and game day, right? Where you've got some teammates, they're not working really hard, but boy, do they perform really well game day. And
Mhm.
others, at least I see this a lot with teenagers who are working really hard in training, and then when it's time to perform, they don't perform as well as their other teammates. And there could be a variety of reasons for it, but certainly that mental aspect of comparison, and maybe they aren't taking care of themselves well enough, they might be overtraining, etc. All these things impact the athlete and the
Mhm.
person.
Yeah, for sure. And you have me thinking too about something that we haven't brought into the room yet, which is like the system and the environment. Like, we're talking at the individual level, and a lot of times there's also these influences of environment and things at systemic levels that then
Yeah.
can certainly be resulting or contributing to the results that you're seeing, whether it is like, you're maximizing your talent, or you're really talented and you're underperforming, or you're a gamer, or whatever these archetypes that we just kind of alluded to. I think system and environment are critical factors that we don't want to ignore as professionals or practitioners ourselves, or especially when we're working at coach levels, to help them to recognize
Mhm.
how their environments that they're building and cultivating are influencing athlete performance.
And in terms of working at that coach level, when you disagreed with a coach's approach to motivation, communication, or handling a dynamic with an athlete. How do you navigate that while still maintaining, a positive presence in the team?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a challenge at times, right? When we're maybe seeing things from our seat and have some sort of different perspective on an approach or a disagreement or something of that nature. I think that's where your relationships are extremely important. And so making sure you have the relationship, you have the rapport, you're able to, have candor with each other. And that's the art of what we do, of knowing when that is there and when that's not there. And so when it is appropriate to maybe share your perspective or give them a different angle or another way of thinking, or bring in some research or science, whatever angle might be appropriate for that relationship or not, to be able to know when you can kind of share, our side of research and science and the things that we learn to help support the coach. I think it's always framed in a level of like, I want to be here to support you. I'm not here, on a different team or on a different side. We're on the same side. We're on the same team, and I want to be here to help you and help support you in your professional development as well. And so I think all those factors come in to be able to know when can I approach that. And then certainly how you approach it, I think, can be huge as well. Like giving them an option, saying like, "Hey, I have some feedback for you. Let me know when's a good time, or let me know if you'd like to hear it." And then you're welcoming them into the conversation, or at least giving them the choice to say, "Yes, I want that feedback," or "You know what, right now, not a good time. I'm way too stressed," or like, I can't add that onto my plate. Coaches are handling a lot, and so
Yeah.
they can be, experiencing all similar types of um, you know performance challenges that athletes are.
Right. And in terms of your own wellness, Kaelene, working inside of an SEC football program is obviously an incredibly demanding role. So, how did you protect your own mental health and overall well being while not only helping everyone else manage
Mm.
this intense pressure, but also just the time commitment is pretty all consuming?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I I certainly believe in the philosophy that we can't pour from an empty cup, and if we're at our best, we're going to give better service to the people we're serving. And so I would say there were times throughout those 3 years where I was doing a pretty good job of it, and there were times where I was not. So um, when I think about some of the things that did really help me, I had some support staff members who I became friends with. And so at times we would say, "Hey, let's get out of the facility and go work from another location," so that we could have a little bit of kind of separation, or
Mhm.
go off site to grab some lunch and then continue working, or have conversation as people and not just related to the work that we do. um, and then similarly, like support staff members, we would go and work out together, or we'd go play tennis as our workout. That was really fun to be like, all right, like we get to go and spend a little bit of time competing too, because a lot of folks in that space are competitors, and so that can be a good piece of self-care as well. So going to play some tennis, going to work out together, going for runs together, those kinds of things were certainly helpful. um, Again, just creating relationship and friendship outside of just work relationship was great. And certainly also outside of work in general, having those social relationships and connections outside of work. But as you mentioned, definitely demanding role. There were times where we were working a lot of hours in a week, and you'd be at the facility bright and early in the morning or dark and early in the morning. So there were long days and not a lot of days off at times. And so you certainly had to check yourself to say, like, okay, what am I needing, or where can I set a few boundaries? So sometimes there were Sundays where I wouldn't come in, or Sundays where I'd come in only for a couple hours, just so that I could have a day off, as opposed to rolling 7-day work weeks. So definitely
Yeah.
demanding, definitely challenging. And so I was navigating those challenges myself. And there were times where I would say, wellness, well-being, flourishing were great, and times where it was like, oh, I need to practice what I preach too.
Right.
Is it then difficult in that environment to not take the athlete's success, somehow tied to your own? Because if they're struggling, what does it say
Mhm.
about the work you're doing? How is that managing that feeling?
Yeah, for sure. There can be that like sense of enmeshment where you're like, oh man, like I'm really tethering, my work to what's going on for an individual or for the team in general. You
Yeah.
definitely feel that stress. I think, especially again, when you're more embedded and integrated, you feel a lot of what the coaches feel or what the athletes feel or what the support staff feels. So again, there can be some benefit to that because you're like, okay, I do have a sense of what you're going through because I'm feeling it myself. And so in some ways you can have some of that compassion and empathy, but then as you mentioned too, we don't want to get too enmeshed with
Yeah.
the success or the performance of the clients that we see and that we work with, to also then help yourself to stay grounded in the work that you're doing and not get too tethered to or connected to the performance on the field. And again, that's like practicing what we preach, right? We're like, okay, process over outcome. If we're connected to the process, if we have a diversified identity that's very holistic in nature, then that's going to help us in our roles too, just like we work with our athletes in those ways to help them to not also get really connected. Like if it was a great day, I'm on a high, I'm feeling the best I've ever felt. If it was a horrible day, I'm feeling the worst I've ever felt.
Yeah.
So how do we help them with that roller coaster? Well, that those are similar or the same principles apply if we're feeling that roller coaster ourselves too.
That makes sense. And shifting towards your role now as the founder of Mile High Performance Consulting, Kaelene, I absolutely love that the very first thing when somebody clicks on your website is that big statement of you have 70,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. Would you like them to be by default or by design? So
Yeah.
tell us and our listeners more about what that means and how it reflects your philosophy of mental.
Yeah, I just love that statistic, and then obviously the phrasing and kind of how we've packaged that together. Um, what it means to me is that, like, we're in a lot of ways training our minds, whether we like it or not, know it or not.
Right.
And so, how are you training your mind, your psychology, your mindsets, your beliefs, and then just the trickle down effect from that, right? The way you think, which then influences, so on and so forth. So, um, I just it speaks to the fact that, like, when we're more in tune with ourselves and when we know ourselves, or when we take the time to again like know our identity and know our values and know what our what we're about, and how we want to move, what our ideal version of ourselves are, that can then help us to inform then uh you know again designing more so the way we move, the way we think, again, like just continue down that line. I think um the more that we train and we do it on purpose, the more that we can live a life of fulfillment and meaning and flourishing. And so I think most, if not all of us, want to live a life where we feel like we're flourishing. And so it takes some work and some effort, and it's certainly by design. When we go by default, a lot of times we're going to go down the paths of again just the machinery that's in our skulls, which is negative tilt and evolutionary and survivalist. And so probably going to have those influences if we're not training and more thoughtful and intentional, and again working by design as opposed to by default. When we're by default, we're probably going to land on that spectrum of again the negativity bias and things of that nature. So and two, like, just we train everything else, right? There are so many things that we train, especially physically. We want to make sure our bodies are healthy and all those things. And so um isn't the brain not the driver of everything else? And so if we're not training it, or if we're not paying attention to it at the least, it's gonna drive us in a lot of directions that we maybe don't even realize we're going or don't want to go, and again just aren't even aware of. So long-winded answer, but I think of all of those things when I think of that phrase.
Well, it's really noteworthy, right? Because we have, like you said, so many thoughts a day, and everybody has both negative and positive, or productive and unproductive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it really is, which ones are you paying more attention to? Because people will sometimes pay way more attention to the negative thoughts. And it's really interesting because you have people like Michael Jordan or Scotty Scheffler who specifically talk about the fact that this shot, this game, this tournament doesn't define who they are. You know, they are a great athlete regardless of the outcome. And similarly, they'll reference that they still have their family that loves them regardless of the outcome of this game, which is really noteworthy. And so they look like these athletes that have tremendous confidence. And at the same time, I think confidence is, it's, while it's the most requested topic in sports psychology, it is often misunderstood even by athletes. And I was curious what you found and how you work with athletes on really kind of living their life or playing their game through their values.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, yeah, you got me thinking about confidence. Another one I could go down a whole rabbit hole on for sure. A lot of times we'll do values exercises, or we'll talk about what your identity, how you describe yourself. We do competitive identity, and then certainly the other things that make you you. Again, that diversification of our identity. What else? Some of the perspective taking, or thinking into the future, right? Looking back on where you are now, like what, certainly what would make you proud, or how do you want to see your life playing out. So lots of various exercises to help just kind of drill down on what are, say 3 core values that are important to you in life. And sometimes those can transfer over to performance too. And we do make sure we're talking also about competitive identity as well. So what are those couple values that you want to live out on the court or on the field, or whatever your competitive arena is. So those are some exercises we certainly do to help then come from those places, because then there's decisions that they're working through and trying to make, where then we can refer back to and say, well, let's look back at those values. If you were making a decision from a place of values, what would you do in this instance? And that can help them to feel really confident in the decision that they're making and grounded in that decision. I'm recalling a conversation that I actually had with an administrator, and was working through a challenge. And they were like, I don't know what to do. I could go this route. I could go that route. And then we went back to, okay, well, what are your values? What makes you you, and what's important to you? And a couple of those values that, came to mind for him that we had already identified, I believe, or at least in that moment that we were able to identify, was like transparency and honesty. And so as soon as he said those things, he was like, oh, I'm done. Okay, I know exactly what I need to do. And then went and had the conversation like right then and there. I was like, okay, like that. It was, I was like, all right, that's awesome. But also just the clarity that that person had, and again the confidence to know like, oh, that just cleared all the noise. There's nothing that's even remotely another option when I think about who I want to be in this moment and in my life. That then can just be really, really supportive and helpful when faced with a dilemma or a challenge. So that story came to mind, so I certainly wanted to share it.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant, the getting clear on what your values are, because then it does imbue you with a type of confidence to move forward. It gives you that sense of direction and confidence in the direction.
Yeah, for sure. And if we're working on identity too, sometimes those will be like our process related goals for a competition, where it's like, okay, we're working on you living out these values or embodying these on, again, in the competitive arena. And so that's what we're going to measure on at the end of the game, or at the end of today. We're going to look back, okay, how did you live those out, as opposed to looking at performance and stat lines and outcomes, because that's not what we're working on right now, at least from our, dynamic. Let's look at how are you living these things out, and how did that help you? How did that make you feel? How are we building on those? Knowing again that those will, get the results that you seek at some point in the future, if not today.
And what about mental toughness? Do you find it can actually be taught? Is it something that people are just naturally wired? Some people are naturally wired to handle pressure better.
Yeah, I feel like in our field, and just in my belief system, I want to see everything can be trained. Everything can be skill that we can build. So mental toughness, resiliency, grit, things of that nature, like those can be trained. Those can be skills that we can develop over time. And it just has to be a concerted effort. So If it's something you're wanting to grow, if you're saying, hey, I really want my mental toughness to improve, well, then let's talk about what does mental toughness even mean to you. Let's first define that. And then through definition, we probably find where are the skills that we can build towards being more mentally tough and whatever that means to you. And we'll pretty much always find some sort of skill, whether again it's like attention and it's like, oh, we just get really distracted or we think about things that aren't productive or helpful in the moment. So let's work on our attention skill that then is going to help you to be more mentally tough. Or discomfort. Maybe it's like we're used to we have a small comfort zone. So how do we start expanding that comfort zone through little exposures of discomfort and intentional opportunities for discomfort, whether it's, again, discomfort drills or whatever that may be. So just for some examples of like, okay, what could mental toughness training even look like?
Yeah.
Those can be verticals or the skills that we're training to help then have this umbrella term of more mental toughness.
And in terms of your definition of mental toughness, has that definition changed throughout your career? And if so, walk us through that process.
Yeah, I feel like I don't even really use that term much myself. I certainly have clients or athletes or coaches that'll use the term mental toughness, and then that's when we'll get into that definitional conversation, because I think it is so variable as to what do you even mean by mental toughness. And so for me, usually when I'm in those conversations, it's me figuring out what does that mean to them, and then how can I help from, again, whether it's language or framing of where we can actually help to grow skill, or maybe even where we can poke some holes in that definition to say, okay, is that definition even or belief around that term, helping you? Or even accurate, like maybe there's some inaccuracies where it's like, oh, was that just like a like social cultural term that then doesn't even have any evidence to it. So I know I didn't really answer your question around my definition of mental toughness, but that's usually how I go about like approaching that conversation with somebody when they bring that type of term to me, because it can mean so many things.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
I wonder if it isn't really or ought not to be kind of tied really into the growth mindset, right? Where you see every misstep as a challenge or as a growth opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
really, that's the thing that tends to create a certain amount of resilience when setbacks aren't the thing that devastate you.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting to talk about helping people define their own terms. What does it mean? What are you looking to
Yeah.
change here? Because
Yeah.
even that, kind of like the values, it requires a certain amount of clarity
Exactly. I always
for
say
people to be
clarity
able.
equals confidence. I don't remember where I got that. It's not from my own brain, but clarity is confidence. If you don't have
Yeah,
clarity, whether it's you're in a system and you have a role and you don't quite have your role defined, like it's very hard to be confident then in your day-to-day tasks and saying like, what do
yeah,
I need to be doing right now? I don't quite know because my role isn't really defined. Similarly for athletes, on depth chart or whatever it may be, surrounding again, what's my role? I don't know that. And I don't have clarity around that. It's hard to go forward with what you think is best and again most productive or most helpful. And then again, I want to bring in like system level stuff to this whole conversation too. Oftentimes I might have a coach come talk to me or an athlete through the coach saying you need more mental toughness or like you got a confidence issue, right? And it's like, okay, let's actually kind of piece that out. Like, what are they trying to say to you, right? When it's an athlete, I'll say, what do you think they're trying to communicate to you? What does that mean to them? Right now, we're kind of trying to see what clarity or lack of clarity we have when a coach says, I need more confidence. And then when I'm working with a coach too, okay, that could be one thing that's going on. Well, there could be a lot of different factors that could be resulting in you feeling like they're not mentally tough, right? What kind of environment are we creating for them? What kind of communication are they getting from us? Even at times, like I can go cognitive psychology route where it's like, okay, what's the drill design? What's the practice design? What's the learning environment look like? And if that's appropriate to my relationship with that person, I might bring that into the conversation as well. Because it could be like, do we have the opportunity to develop the skill that you're wanting to see that's not showing up? Maybe it's not even in the practice design. And then how are we supposed to have the confidence in that skill if we don't have the quality of practice surrounding it? So sometimes I'll zoom myself out to say, okay, let's start with more of the physical, technical, tactical to then get back up to the mental, as opposed to just like looking at, okay, coach said this, it has to be this. I might kind of get us to look at a fuller picture, a more systemic level of things, rather than just starting with confidence. Is oftentimes, like you alluded to earlier, when someone comes to me with confidence, in my mind, I'm not just going to share this with them right off the bat, but in my mind, I'm like, it's probably something else that is masquerading as confidence, or that other people are naming as confidence because that's what they know, and that's their, whether it's vocabulary or level of, like, again, know-how, just like it's confidence, got to be confidence. And for us in the space, I'm like, okay, there could actually be something else that we're going to pivot towards through the initial lens of confidence.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that, and I think people aren't that aware that things can masquerade as something else, and it's really eye-opening when they realize certain emotions or expressions really are covering up something they're uncomfortable sharing with other people. What about, are there things that research supports, but you find that athletes and coaches are still really slow to embrace?
Meditation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yep, yep.
That's the shortest answer yet.
Yeah, that one was very clear for me as soon as you asked it. Yeah, meditation for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. I believe that one. So,
Mhm.
what really inspired you then to create this Mile High Performance Consulting, and what's the transition been like, pivoting from a team environment to private practice? I know young, aspiring sports psychologists are very interesting how to get into the space, and how the spaces are different,
Yeah,
yeah, what they can expect for themselves.
sure. Yeah. So when I first graduated from my master's, I somewhat tried the private practice route myself, and let's see. Well, I started off at the collegiate coaching level, so I did a couple years coaching college softball, and then transitioned back just because I wanted to put more of my time and energy into the mental performance side of sport. And I felt that was very challenging to get private practice up and running without a lot of experience, without the potential, like, resume, without a lot of years, and oftentimes it was just really challenging to get a steady flow of any kind of clientele or teams. And so that was really challenging. I feel like during that time period, I was like, is this the field? Is this the direction that I go? Do I pivot? Do I do something else? So yeah, I want to acknowledge that it's really hard to establish private practice, especially when you're coming right out of school. And that was my experience. That was also years ago, so that could look different now, and I hope it does look different now, because there's more acknowledgement and interest and mainstream utilization of mental performance consultants. So I hope that has changed. I hope it continues changing, and was certainly a challenge for me right when I came out of school. So since then, I got my LPC. So I worked in mental health space for a handful of years, and so that was great to then learn the full spectrum of mental performance, performance optimization through mental health spectrum. Really enjoyed that work, and again, gaining that knowledge base and experience and expertise. And then was fortunate to get the role at Vanderbilt, which was just awesome ability to do a depth of work with one team for multiple years. So that was, I think, unique, certainly compared to private practice. And so that was again just really fun, like depth of work with one organization, one program. And in private practice, I would say for most of us, it looks different, where you've got several contracts, or very multiple clients, or things of that nature, where you're juggling a lot, or your hands are in a lot of different buckets. So that's what my private practice looks like now. So I have some contracts where I still get that sense of team and feeling of being somewhat, whether it's embedded or just a part of that team, that system. And I love being part of team. I love team atmosphere and team energy. That's something that I really enjoy just about sports in general, is the power of team and the energy of team. So it's really nice to have a couple of those opportunities where there's still some sense of being in a team or part of a team, not necessarily in a team, but part of a team. And then there's the consultancy piece where you might be a little bit more removed, or one-on-one opportunities with various clients where then you're not a part of that organization or the system that they're a part of whatsoever. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that, or I enjoy that as well, being kind of a third party able to help support an athlete or performer where I'm not a part of the system that they're in every single day. It can be kind of that fresh perspective. So again, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but private practice looks very different than working with one team. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the other things that come to mind is just when you have your own practice and set your hours. You work when you
Yeah.
want to work. You don't work when you don't want to work. And so the other side of that is that the stress is all because of me. So if I'm stressed, it's because of me. If I'm not stressed, it's because of me. And so that is
Yeah.
certainly
You can't get away from you.
yeah, exactly. Then being in a system and working within the organization and all of that, where stress can come from a lot of different angles. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind that are, certainly prevalent in, maybe differences between being an embedded provider or provider for one organization or one team, and then having a private practice and what that can look like.
And now your clients include, of course, athletes and coaches, but also now executives, professionals across industries. So, what mental skills seem to transfer across every performance domain?
I think attention is a huge one, especially in our current state, modern life, or the attention economy. So I'd say that is the biggest one one of the biggest ones. The other one's just nervous system training. And so how are we, down regulating or activating that parasympathetic side of the nervous system, especially with high performers. Oftentimes you have that high motor, you're go, do, high achieving, and you want to perform well. So probably needing more rest and recovery than needing a motivation or the discipline and drive. So I think those can be certainly some crossover conversations or skills as well. Those are definitely the two that come to mind. And then I can always bring it back to meditation, how beneficial meditation can be for all types of performers, to build your awareness, build your attentional skill and capacity and endurance, attentional healing for sure. And so, I mean, meditation is in a lot of ways one of my go-tos, because of the line of research and how beneficial it can be for all of us to be engaging in it. So, yeah.
On that note, sort of some coaches really believe that pressure builds toughness while others really think it breaks them down. Where do you think the balance is?
I mean, that, I don't know, I might ask more about what that even means for a coach, but I think if you're in a high performing industry, you're going to have pressure. That's inevitable. You're going to have adversity, that there's going to be hard times. Pressure is going to exist. However, it's also the perception of it. So I think in our field, you can make a case for the fact that there's no such thing as pressure if you want to come at it from that angle. So sometimes with clients, I'll just offer up here's our schools of thought. One is that that pressure is all perception. And so we're creating this sense of pressure through how we're thinking about this experience, how we're perceiving it, our mindset towards it, and then our stress response. So one can be do we want to see that pressure is only existing in our heads? Maybe someone's like, oh yeah, I like that one. I want to talk more down that route. Or, the other side of the coin could be, okay, yeah, pressure is real, right? There's bigger games, bigger moments, higher pressure experiences. And so if we want to look at it that way, to say yeah, pressure is real and it's going to exist, well, then how do we train under pressure, for pressure, create transferable training opportunities so that our nervous system and our psychology, physiology is all being trained under some sense of similar pressure that we're going to feel at whatever point in, again, our competitive arena, whether it's postseason or big moments or whatever we want to name as pressure types of experiences.
Mhm. And in terms of pressure in the kind of coach athlete relationship, how can a coach be demanding, sometimes very demanding, while
Mhm.
still creating psychological safety at the same time? What does that balance look like?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think that's a great question. I think that's the art of coaching too, and like really coming from a philosophy of relationship first, person first.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
if you have the relationship, high trust and high support in the relationship, then we can get into those spaces where we're able to be demanding or we're holding accountability. Because the athlete is very clear and knows that it's coming from the place of care and support and love, rather than we don't nurture and foster that relationship, and then that's when it can be really damaging, to relationship, to athlete performance, to mental health, um, because there isn't this bedrock of knowing that the leader is very much coming from a place of care and love.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, right? If you have a good relationship, you certainly tolerate a lot more, and you're motivated to work for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really noteworthy.
Yeah, and
Have
we
you
always have
ever had
the
Oh, go
opportunity to
ahead.
repair. So
Yeah.
even if there is a rupture, even if the coach or whomever leader, uh, speaks to their athlete, client, whoever it is, and you can tell that there's some sort of rupture, or you can tell that it influences the relationship in a negative way, you can always go back and repair that as the leader. And so I always, um, want to make sure that I share that if I'm consulting with a coach too, to say, okay, if there ever is a moment, sometimes that repair can actually be even more of a depth of relationship now
Oh,
because
yeah.
you repaired it and because they really know that you come from a place of care because you took the time to make sure that the relationship and that athlete is feeling the way that you actually intended or wanted them to feel, and that again you do very much care about their well-being, and them as people, not just as a performer, and whether they're you know it's having success or not. So
Yeah.
yeah, the repair can actually be even more, even better for the relationship because there was
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that builds a level of trust,
Yeah.
when we can mend, when everybody can own what they contributed. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we like to ask all our guests on the show what your next Everest is. Is there some goal that you are working towards achieving?
Oh, yeah, great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just my own meditation practice. So I think that's an Everest that I am currently climbing. So having a consistency of practice where I practice multiple times a week, if not every day, and then having depth of practice or extended practice where I'm meditating for hours at a time or half or full days, so that I'm gaining all the great benefits that I know exist within meditation, but then also
Yeah.
that I am experiencing and kind of walking the walk if I'm sharing this as a tool for athletes, coaches, and other performers, and so that I can facilitate meditation better myself. So,
Excellent.
That's super cool.
mhm.
And Kaelene, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing your time and insights with us, and then also all of our listeners. Where can listeners learn more about you and your work?
Oh yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. This was awesome. Really enjoyed chatting with you both and just going back and forth with some questions and getting me thinking. It's always good. And yeah, where you can find me. So www.mhperform.coach is our website, and you can always fill out a form there to get in contact with us. My email is Kaelene at mhperform.coach, and then also have LinkedIn and an Instagram. So feel free to follow for information there. I try to repost a lot of great content that I see. So I always like to share what all kinds of people in the sport and high performance world are sharing to share, just be, share through the social media that I have, so that hopefully it's helping support you in your well being and your algorithm, and not just giving you a bunch of junk. So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kaelene. This was wonderful.
All right. Thank you for having me.